Hello!
Hello!
This is only hope. We're your,
Hey!
We're your hosts, Eugene and Thomas Haslip. And we're collectively wondering today whether we're wondering, just like Queen Amidala, is democracy dying with thunderous applause?
Yes, that is a very good question.
Um,
Really, we just want to know how everybody's doing. It's something I would like to discuss is people who are aware of what's happening and seeing this. And obviously, we're recording this January 11th. So we will be focusing heavily on the don't even know what to call it that happened on January 6th, 2021.
We can call it like what the media is calling it, the Capitol Insurrection.
Okay, we'll call it that
then. Anyway, welcome to the pod. This is the pod where you can, where we get therapy and you guys get interesting, hopefully positive, hopefully hopeful political news. But today, I don't know. So, do you want to describe what happened last week?
Well, our best effort will be to educate, because it's not going to be super hopeful with what happened this past week, this time. So yeah, I can discuss broadly what happened, what went down last Wednesday.
Let's dive right in.
Okay. All right. So this is the day that the United States Congress formally recognizes the Electoral College vote that had already been counted and certified by the states to determine the next president of the United States. And Donald Trump and his goons, his fans, his supporters, Republicans, really, all Republicans. We need to just make sure that we,
And I'm sure there are some good people in there too.
Yeah, right. Very fine people. They decided that this would be their day to make a stand for the election that was stolen from their leader, Donald Trump. And they organized...
Was that the justification, that it was stolen?
Yeah, the organization was literally called Stop the Steal. And that is the organization that, Representative Mo Brooks and several others organized with to get people to go to Washington. They listened to Donald Trump speak in the morning, and he basically ginned them up to march over to the Capitol building and stop the steal that was happening. And
did they have any evidence of this?
Oh, well, that's a good question, Eugene. You see, the thing is that they had brought what evidence they thought they had into dozens of different courts of law and were rejected in every case for lack of evidence. So no, they had no evidence of election fraud. They had rumors and QAnon conspiracy theories, but no evidence of election fraud.
It seems like if this steal thing had actually happened, there might be some evidence. Like,
you would think.
Like maybe they could find like 1 million votes that were actually, maybe even like, God, now we're like starting to get into like Lindsey Graham quoting, which is really bad. You say there's 10,000. I say show me 10. You can't even give me 2. I'm just like, oh man, like they really like didn't have any evidence. There's just nothing.
No, nothing. Nothing of substance at all.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
So with their lack of evidence, but strong belief that they have been wronged by the system in some way, because Donald Trump and others have told them so for months, they decided to show up to the Capitol, march on the Capitol building itself during the time that our United States House of Representatives and Senate, including the Vice President of the United States, who was presiding over the Senate, during the time that they were acknowledging and certifying the Electoral College votes. So this means that every leader in the country, minus Donald Trump, was in the building. And this group of citizens who call themselves patriots showed up with weapons, pipe bombs. They erected a gallows and hung a noose from it. They had zip ties that they were carrying. They marched to the Capitol building where there was a barrier and some Capitol police to keep them out. And they basically rushed the Capitol Police violently, broke through the barriers, broke through another line of Capitol Police, up the stairs and into the building. Again, they were breaking windows, doors, everything to get into the building, carrying their Trump flags and wearing their Trump hats, and some were carrying Confederate flags and some were carrying Blue Lives Matter flags, which is ridiculous, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Into the Capitol building. Go ahead, Eugene.
Yeah, I mean, that Blue Lives Matter, just to highlight the hypocrisy there.
Yeah.
What was it? One cop or two? Didn't 4 people die? One of them was a citizen, and 3 of them were cops.
Right. I think only 2 of them were cops. One of them died from wounds to the head from a fire extinguisher being smashed into his head, and the other one died of suicide after the fact.
Right.
That's all I've heard.
I mean, I cannot imagine dying by being beaten to death with a fire extinguisher. I can really only imagine doing it to video game characters in like The Last of Us or like GTA. But that's a horrific way to die. And
absolutely.
For these people to claim that, the lives of cops matters when they're doing this to them,
right,
seems a bit hypocritical. Anyway,
quite a bit.
So then what happened?
Yeah, just to get back to how it basically ended. Well, they stormed the building while the members were inside. They were in the middle of doing the business of the people and had to be interrupted and whisked away in the nick of time before these rioting insurrectionists got into the Senate chamber and just outside of the House chamber. According to news reports, it seems likely that the woman who was killed just outside the House chamber. But there were still members inside at that time. So they whisked the members away to a safe location just as these people were getting into the building and into the chamber. And they kind of just milled around for hours. Didn't seem like the police were in any rush to get them out. There were people on the top of the steps. There were people chanting horrible, horrible things.
I mean, they wanted to get at Mike Pence. Weren't they like chanting stuff about Mike Pence, like wanting to essentially hang him from that gallows that they had posted?
Hang Mike Pence, yeah. So
they were actually chanting "Hang Mike Pence."
Yeah, they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and part of the reason is because Donald Trump had put out there that Mike Pence could stop this certification of the Electoral College votes on this day. And when it became clear that Mike Pence was not going to do that because he can't, his supporters and Donald Trump himself turned on Mike Pence. There were reports from Maggie Haberman in the New York Times and others that Donald Trump became furious at Mike Pence. And that is part of the reason why he did not do anything for hours to stop this mob from attacking the Capitol building.
And you remember that Don showed up at this rally himself with, his personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani and his son. Was it Eric or was it Don Jr.?
I think it was Don Jr.
Don Jr.
I'm
to
not sure.
goad on these quote unquote protesters, but really just this mob into, going into the Capitol and creating chaos and violence.
Right.
Like
intimidation as well.
This is just absolutely insane.
Right.
And where were the military police this entire time?
There were a lot of issues with this, from the Capitol Police to the DC Police to the National Guard. Like I said, these people were allowed to just kind of hang out inside the building and on the steps of the building for hours. Hours went by without anything being done about it. And there are so many questions now, and we don't have all the answers because there has not been any official briefing as to why there was such a failure.
It's so crazy.
I shared with you, I'm going to read a little bit of Chris Hayes had a thread, Chris Hayes from MSNBC. I had a thread about how little we know about this still when it happened days ago now, where if there was a mass shooting or a terrorist attack, a foreign terrorist attack, I should say, there would have been a briefing immediately where they're giving updated information multiple times a day about how many police officers were hurt or killed, how many civilians were hurt or killed, how many people were hospitalized, what suspects are still at large, what suspects have been apprehended. And there has been piecemeal information put together by reporters, but nothing officially from any government agency leading an investigation into the matter, as far as we've heard, and it's already Monday of the following week. That's ridiculous. I haven't seen it before. I haven't been around all that long, but I have not seen anything like that before, where you have something so huge, where there isn't any official word on what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, this is
the public,
and this is literally the Capitol, where we send our representatives. Right, we send our representatives to this building. It's like should be one of the high security places, because something like this, where somebody goes into the building to threaten violence to get their way and to stop democracy. That's exactly what they're there to prevent. But the police are there to prevent. So the idea that there's been no official briefing is just completely mind-blowing. Like, you just imagine, I don't know if some of our listeners do we have listeners yet? Some of our listeners
cross his fingers.
Some of our listeners are too young to remember 9/11, but I mean, we got a briefing with that, right? We had President
there was
Bush come out.
The 9/11 commission was hundreds of pages long, describing in detail what happened. Some of it was heavily redacted, but it was a hundreds of pages long commission that took them months and months to put together, with months and months of updates. I mean, this is part of the reason why Rudy Giuliani became famous in the first place, is because he gave these briefings on what they were doing every day, pulling bodies out of the rubble, and what the police and firefighters and first responders were doing after 9/11. And George W. Bush, he went to the site and they gave a briefing. They had a press photo op right outside the area. And that's what we're not getting now. It's like, there's so little information out there. It, like I said, is only from different reporters from different outlets posting what they have learned through their reporting. without any official word. It's just completely different. But there's a lot about this that's different from what we would have expected, or what some of us would have expected. I'm not all that surprised, but what some of us would expect from our government. Can get into that later if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, from here, I guess the thing that I want to kind of explore is, I guess, why this is a big deal. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like, I hear some chatter, I guess, of schools and teachers not necessarily taking this that seriously. And, obviously these are all like anecdotes now, but,
Right.
I'm listening to Conan O'Brien's podcast, and, he's talking about how he had to pull his kids away from their virtual learning at school to just watch on TV what was happening at the Capitol, and be like, this is literally the most momentous political moment and historical moment possibly in the last 50 years of U.S. history.
Well, I mean, maybe since Reagan was shot, maybe since Kennedy was shot, Bobby or JFK, or this is it's a targeting of our political leaders that makes it's
so hard to quantify, because symbolically this is a literal attack on democracy. Like, you could argue that an assassination attempt on the president, as horrific as that is, isn't necessarily quite as symbolic of democracy as attacking the House of Representatives.
Well, again, the reason for the attack, for example, Reagan was shot by a madman. Like that there wasn't any reason behind it. I think he was obsessed with Jodie Foster at the time, or something like that. Our historically inclined listeners can inform us as to what went on there. But this was a political attack. This was an attack on democracy from people who were attempting to overthrow democracy for their political reasons, to install their leader, their political leader, as president basically forever.
Right. Literally to override the election results, for which they had zero evidence that it was fraudulent, and to put their chosen leader, the guy who lost in the election, to let him remain in power.
Right. Exactly. And then the other reason why it's so big is because of how close this came to becoming extremely violent, potentially. There were pipe bombs confirmed on site at the DNC and the RNC, which means that they were attacking both Democrats and Republicans. Now, those bombs didn't go off and no one got hurt from those, but they could have. There was another person arrested with 11 homemade bottles of napalm. And like we mentioned before, there was a gallows erected with a noose tied to it. And that guy didn't look like an amateur noose maker. He looked like he had noosed something up before. I don't know. I just feel like this is there's very serious political implications here, because this was like I said, it was a politically motivated attack. It was not just random crazies. It was not an individual or lone wolf thing. It was a coordinated effort, organized by some House members, apparently. I don't want to speculate and get into who may or may not have been involved and to what extent they were involved, but it seems highly likely that they were coordinating in some way with some elected officials in Washington and the Capitol Police. See, this is what I didn't want to get into, because this is.
I mean, I don't blame you. It was a terrible week, and like I'm still trying to wrap my head around like, I mean, do we like democracy anymore? I personally feel like it's still one of the safest, most stable ways to govern that hopefully ensures the the most safety to its citizens. I mean, if you're just thinking about like basic systems of government, we know how fascism turned out in Germany. That's not good. We know how authoritarian regimes turn out, and those aren't good. You can look at Brazil.
Well, part of the problem is that we don't have a democracy.
I mean, no,
we
yeah,
have
like we don't.
We have a
one.
representative democratic republic with a president, Senate, House, and Supreme Court.
We don't have
level.
like a Greece-like democracy, but we have, as close to one as you can, as I guess, a country that was created in more modern history has gotten, without maybe everyone necessarily like. I don't exactly know what Greece's politics are like. I hear they're messy pretty too, but like, the messiness of democracy works both ways, right? It's good.
Well, here's the. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
Well, I would say like it's good because you get a lot of ideas brought forth, to the forefront supposedly, right? And you can debate that depending on what type of democracy you have or representative government that you have. Maybe
right.
Some ideas don't get out there as much as others. Obviously,
right.
That's to an extent true in the United States. But the overall idea behind democracy is that, you get all this collection of ideas, the strength of all of these different types of ideas and the best ones coming to the forefront, makes the country strong. Now, the downside is that, it takes a very long time to get anything done. You have a lot of debate and argument over, what's going to happen and what society ultimately decides should happen. But at the very least, it's not like, one person just deciding, well, this is what it's going to be, and, tough luck if you don't like it, like.
Right. Well, all right. Let me push back on this a little bit, Eugene, because this is a big issue that is not talked about very often, but I'm glad that we're bringing it up now, because while we do have a representative democracy, there are still gatekeepers. And for your example, bringing ideas to the floor for a vote can be blocked by the majority leader, the Speaker of the House, or the majority leader in the Senate, so that you don't get a vote. And when you have rules like veto and filibuster, you end up moving even more slowly than you should. And that's part of the issue, is that even in this representative democratic republic that we have, there are still too many impediments to progress that have existed for years. It's actually getting worse now. I
mean,
but these things have existed.
Yeah, and I acknowledge all that, right? Like our democracy, assuming that we're going to agree it's a democracy, right? It's not perfect by any means, and there are definitely lots of mechanics to impede progress, and a lot of it is on purpose. Things that were old mechanics from the days when the nation was really still forming, and you had states who were concerned about, about slaves and the whole thing, like the maintaining power after abolition, the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but, at least symbolically, right? At least part of the historical identity of this country is democratic. So, this is really, really shocking. This what happened last week is really, really shocking because it's a rejection from. I mean, I know it's 1,000 people who were at that insurrection, maybe
more,
maybe more.
2,000.
But it's representative of maybe 70 million people in this country.
Maybe.
Which one is like of the voting, of the people who actually do vote, it's like 46%, something like that, 42,
something like that, 40, 45, 46.
You guys can check check the numbers, Google it.
Depends on how many people turn out to vote, and
right. And then
this was a high turnout election.
So like you could almost round up and say half, right? You could say almost half the people who vote in America may not be in favor of democracy anymore, right? They don't care what the other side thinks or what other people in this country think, assuming that this 1,000 people represents the larger amount, right? And then you get to the same number is 30% overall of the voting population. So I mean that makes the number a little bit more hopeful, but then you're wondering like where are the people who aren't voting? And that in itself, do those people who are not voting, do they not care about democracy? No, a lot of people who come to this country, they are coming from places that are worse, and they are citizens, so they can vote. So why aren't we able to, like clearly see what is a democratic solution here? Or like just be in favor of democracy and not do this insurrection and just accept, what happened. Like that's one of the scariest things.
And this from the party of law and order, but the problem is that the law had almost always been on their side in the past, and this time it wasn't. They didn't win in the courts. They didn't win the elections. They didn't win in the courts. But they maintained their belief that the election was rightfully theirs, regardless of evidence to the contrary. And there was no amount of evidence that could be put forth to sway their opinion on this, and it led to this happening. I wish we could talk more about how people being misinformed for decades, for their entire lives, about such basic concepts as evidence and truth over lies and propaganda, and how that failure to educate and to get people to think critically led to something like this happening. And what it could lead to in the future that might be even worse.
Right. And so I'm trying to predict maybe some of our either younger listeners or more open-minded right-wing listeners, possibly.
Hey.
And I'm trying to predict their response. It could be like, what about these people who think that small government, or that they're in favor of small government and large government is not good, blah, blah, blah. And then, these people maybe had a legitimate reason, blah, 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 too. And I would argue there's no legitimate reason for violence ever.
None. And also, you're not on the side of small government, so
and they're not on the side of small government often because whenever they want something done, they are very much okay with it being done as long as it's their idea. But man, like, I don't know. This is, I'm still just like shocked.
I am too. There are a lot of reasons why that so many people could be duped or led to these kinds of opinions and feelings about the country, such that they felt they need to take it back from whomever they think stole it from them. It's upsetting.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with really the country not truly reckoning with its past.
Yes.
This is what I was trying to get to, and I couldn't remember, so I was covering up by saying I was shocked. The podcast trick, guys.
Nice, awesome.
But yeah, so I was going to build off your point and say that in education, a lot of, I mean, I actually don't really know how most U.S. history is taught nowadays. I mean, it's been, how old am I now? Oh, geez.
Don't date yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's been like around
It hasn't
14,
been that long.
It's been around 14 years, though, since...
I remember my AP US history course.
I was terrible at history.
That long ago.
But even like U.S. history, right? A lot of it is kind of taught around war and military strategy.
Yes.
Is that what you experienced as well?
Yes, it's usually taught from war to war, and always from the perspective of the winner. Very rarely, even in American history, do they talk about wars that America was less successful in. Like, I remember the Vietnam War just kind of being glossed over.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that a lot when you go back after having learned more about it, going back to look at how history was taught to you as a child, about how much was glossed over that would be seen negatively today. And again, I don't know how things are being done to, in classrooms at this particular time, but
I mean, I could imagine classrooms in the South, maybe, especially maybe rural areas, not necessarily teaching maybe even what we have learned in the North. And that's, pure speculation. But I mean, I would love for somebody who grew up in a rural South to come on the pod and tell us how they were taught U.S. history. I mean, there's no like cultural reckoning, right? Like we didn't really focus on what white flight really meant. It just kind of happened, And so like, for those of you who don't know, white flight was when, Black people who were, say it again.
End of World War II with the flight to the suburbs.
Flight to the suburbs, right. So Black people were, getting wealthier and being able to move into wealthier neighborhoods. And when they would move into these nicer suburbs, white people would leave for various reasons.
Certain parts of the city. Yeah.
In certain parts of the city as well. They were either afraid or they just, believed that the presence of Black people in their communities made the community worse, just really racist stuff. And
it wasn't just Black people either. There were also immigrant issues at that time too.
Okay. Yeah.
Most
I mean,
of the time.
this is how good my history is, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not experts on the subject. We don't know everything about this. We're speaking broadly.
yeah.
Please correct us and do your own research.
But this is kind of like the general gist that I got from when I was, reviewing history as a older person. Um, Thomas, where was I going with this?
White flight and how the reasons for it happening were never really discussed.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about.
And so when people don't understand, what happened here and why Black communities were put at such a disadvantage over time, right? Because of white flight, because the houses and the communities around them completely devalued because of the unfair ways in which banks would evaluate these properties. How banks would not loan the same way to Black people as they would to white people. And if you don't learn all these things and you believe that everything is, fair when people are born, that it doesn't matter, the place that they were born into doesn't matter, and that, your your success in life is purely based off of your own efforts as opposed to the context of your environment also mattering a lot. I mean, they just believe it's all nurture and no nature, or no, wait, all nature, no nurture.
Nature and no nurture.
Right. God, messed that one up really bad.
I mean, Bill O'Reilly the clown grew up in one of those communities in Long Island, near where
Bill O'Reilly of "We'll do it live."
Right.
Go! That's a viral meme, guys. Look it up.
I know. Look it up. Look up. We'll do it live. It's a great one. Yeah, he grew up in one of these neighborhoods and believed that he was great and that everything he did was great and that America was great. But the fact of the matter is that they were given grants or what is the what's the term for what they give to former veterans, GI Bill.
Oh, GI Bill, yeah.
To help to buy these homes at really cheap prices and only allow white people to move there just by not showing Black families homes in those areas and not loaning them money to buy homes in those areas. They created ghettos intentionally.
Yeah.
And and people like Bill O'Reilly grow up to think that it's through their own magical ability as to why he's become a successful millionaire, and everyone who is poor is because where are the fathers or whatever other nonsense.
They didn't try hard enough. Or you blame the parents who have to work, who are often single parents, and they have to work, countless hours to be able to support their children and be able to just put food on the table or put a roof over their heads. Mm-hmm. And often they are essentially born into the situation, and the education systems are not good in urban areas. They just aren't. They don't have the same property taxes that suburbs.
I mean, it
do.
happens at every level. You could talk about education. You could talk about hiring practices, housing practices. Every facet of American life is steeped in this racism that disadvantages people of color. It's something that has always existed and has taken different forms: slavery, Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander's definition of our current corporate structure where people work for wages that they can't live on to make money for the corporation while still basically living in poverty. And also the criminal justice system. And it's just there are so many ways in which the country has remained racist from its original sin of slavery. And it has never been addressed fully. There has never been proper education on the issue broadly. Obviously, if you specialize in it in college, then you'll be able to learn everything there is to know about it. There are lots and lots of great authors and books that I'd be happy to recommend that I should keep reading myself.
Right. But the point
Except
is, like,
for one
it's not,
that we don't have to discuss.
Yeah. But the point is, it's not part of the national consciousness. It's not part of the national framework for our education system.
Right. The point is that the people who represent that 75 million voters who voted for Donald Trump, not only do they feel like Donald Trump is a great guy, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to not know how not great of a guy he is, I mean, geez.
Right. But not only do they not know that, but they also have never been confronted with the ideas that the country is racist.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, you think that our education is bad and think like I was still able to learn what I would say are the right things, right? From reading The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, by reading No Is Not Enough from Naomi Klein. All of these, you know, different views of history really from the people's eyes instead of from, you know, military's eyes or from corporations' eyes. And to really learn, you know, what's all these different perspectives and different stories that we didn't learn in high school. And so just imagine in the South where they still have Confederate monuments up and they had Confederate flags up. And like, not only did they not
traditions,
right? Not only did they not reckon with history, they are celebrating the oppression in their history.
Right. It's part of it. The traditions passed down generation to generation are traditions of the Confederacy. And they don't see them as... I remember having this discussion years ago with a guy in Missouri about why the Confederate flag is about their tradition and legacy rather than about slavery and racism. And I told him, as a Black person from New York, that he was wrong. I understand if your family legacy is you know, whatever it is, based on where you grew up, but what it means to everyone should be the same. Just because you have a feeling about it that way doesn't mean that it doesn't mean slavery and racism, because that's exactly what it is. That's what it means. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that until we're able to begin at least doing that in education, I mean, you're still going to see these massive problems with just people just believing that racism doesn't exist and that, you know, these 75 million Trump voters, that they're going to continue to believe that their rights are the ones that are being infringed on, that they're the ones that people are being racist towards. It's just really bizarre world out there. And we just need a better education system to be able to, you know, help this country as a whole confront its history and to truly, you know, move forward. And then, you know, beyond that, then you need to actually do the policies.
And we can get into that on a future episode about why it is so difficult to get policies enacted that would actually help people.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what was on my mind for sure. Just like, hey, are we doing this democracy thing still? Because I think it's good. I think it's ideal, if we don't want to fall into one person gets to decide everything.
Yeah, it has to be protected. It has to be fought for. You have to show up to vote. If you're under 18 listening to this, then make sure you register to vote, and not just for president either. Local government is a disaster right now across the country.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
and
things
that's a part of the reason too, by the way,
Yeah.
with education, is that local governments are a disaster.
You're absolutely right. The people who want to keep power, who don't represent the majority of the people, because like there are a lot of policies that we favor as a country, like Medicare for all. We actually do want as a people. But
Ending the prohibition on marijuana.
Yeah, right. And unfortunately, there are people who know how to get into positions of power who do not represent the people, and they represent minority interests. And unfortunately, most people in America, I would say, don't know how to fight that. They don't even know that it's happening. And if they do know, they don't really know how to organize to combat that or to get into those positions of power. And I would say that that's something that could be done as early as high school. Like, create a structure. I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, I think about it all the time because I'm an educator. But like, why isn't the entire school part of student government? Like, why is that not just a thing? Right? Why isn't every homeroom its own what do they call the representative?
Well, the student body president?
No, like in the state. Like what
assembly or
no
legislature?
No, the areas, the sectors. Like, hold on, I've got to click clack. Districts. Why isn't every classroom like a district? In a state, right? And then you create a smaller version of U.S. government within your high school. And
I have not heard this idea from you before, and I already love it.
Yeah, it seems so simple to, maybe create some things that students are able to have a say in, right? To safely have a say in, and to have the entire school be able to either have assembly and debate on them, or to vote on those things, to lobby and to organize within classrooms, within homerooms, and then across homerooms. I mean, how is this not kind of built in to our education? And then this system, then you can use it to teach about how it works in real life with local governments.
Right. Yeah, I love this idea. From my recollection of high school, there was a student body president, and it was only just whoever the most popular person was, and all they did was organize like the prom or something.
Right, exactly.
And no one was involved. No one even know who was in charge or what they did, and that is a wasted opportunity. I totally agree. I think that you should get people engaged in their own schools, making sure that you're exercising your rights to the voting process, having people running for office in a real way, where you have debates and put forward ideas, and yeah, I think that's great. And it'd be a great way to teach people about how government actually works and how it's run.
Yeah. I mean, if we're for democracy, let's start young, right?
Absolutely.
Let's make it part of the national identity.
Right. So you're asking if democracy works, and my response was, if you have a well-informed electorate, then yes, it's great.
Right.
If you allow, if you allow so many people to remain ignorant or misinformed, then you have issues like we are seeing now.
Yeah, for sure. Any last thoughts, Thomas? I got a couple. But you first.
The only thing I was going to mention about the events of January 6th, the insurrection, was the treatment of the police toward these individuals, and how it made me feel watching that, after you and I and many of us who support the Black Lives Matter movement saw that coverage over the summer of police dressing up in riot gear and brutally beating people who were peacefully protesting.
Right.
And to see these people storming the building, breaking through barricades, swinging at, injuring, maiming, and obviously in one case murdering a Capitol police officer, and to see the rest of the police, or some of them at least, still treating these people as friends, as though they were hosting them and ushering them into the building, taking selfies with them, and acting as escorts almost, rather than as police during something so serious.
Yeah, and you guys,
the fact that they were allowed to, yeah.
I mean, you guys can just
What?
Google, these images of comparing, how the Capitol Police handled the situation compared to how they handled Black Lives Matter protests. Where the Lincoln Memorial was just lined with National Guards troops. I mean, there was no way that anybody from Black Lives Matter protests was getting anywhere near the Lincoln Memorial.
Right.
But with this, a lot of these Trump protesters, insurrectionists, they were white, and they just kind of got to go in.
Almost exclusively white.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, really incredible. The different videos that you see.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and how long they stayed inside the building also. I couldn't believe. I was watching on Wednesday for hours, and they were still in the building. They were inside Nancy Pelosi's office, inside Whip Clyburn's office. And there has been so little discussion about staff members of these representatives who are cowering under desks rooms away from these violent insurrectionists, where they were threatened, their lives were threatened.
Yeah, and this is both sides. Both Democrats and Republicans were cowering. Right. They were all afraid.
Yeah, Grace Meng, the representative who represents Flushing, Queens and surrounding areas there in Queens, she was separated from the group and was just hiding under her desk for 6 hours, I think she said on her Twitter page. That's unacceptable. That's threat. That's intimidation. That's terror.
Right.
But they weren't even treated like regular criminals.
Right.
I mean, they talk so much over the summer, all over every network, and especially obviously Fox News and other right-wing outlets, about looters and rioters and such during the Black Lives Matter protests, when they were looting from individual stores, a tiny, tiny percentage of people breaking windows and stealing things out of a store, and characterizing the entire Black Lives Matter movement as looters, rioters, and violent criminals. Meanwhile, this group of people breached the Capitol building and were treated as almost friends and allowed to stay in there for hours.
Yeah.
I just could not believe that.
With intent to do harm. And, you know,
right.
It was just, it seemed miraculous that they didn't happen to find a, you know, well-known left politician to, you know, really do harm. Can you imagine if they found Ilhan Omar or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or even Nancy Pelosi? Like
I mean, or Mike Pence at this point. I mean, it didn't even have to necessarily be a left politician. It could have been Mike Pence. Who knows what they would have done if they got near him.
Right. I mean, watch the videos. Listen to the audio. Like, it's frightening. And then, you know, if you have the stomach for it, you know, watch the one where the young woman dies. But the proximity to the House chamber, like, they were that close. There's a reason why they fired a bullet out. I'm not saying they should have. I'm just saying that was the last stand there. And if they had breached that, I mean, I'm pretty sure the Congress members were still in there at that time.
Still inside. Yes, they were still. Some of them were still inside that chamber at that time. Yes,
like, they had not found a place to retreat to. So it just could have been a lot worse, and we are already lucky that it wasn't worse. But obviously, this should never have happened to begin with.
Right.
And so, you know,
and there's more we can get into about the refusal to deploy the National Guard by Donald Trump, and then Pence had to order it much later in the day, and the competing statements from Biden and Trump after it had already began, and Biden telling Trump to step up, and then Trump stepping up by still spreading election fraud lies and
right.
kinds of other nonsense.
Anyway,
we don't have to get into all that. I just wanted to mention that the difference in the treatment of these insurrectionist terrorists compared to peaceful protesters was striking. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. I thought that maybe we would end on a positive note because, you know, I hope. Let's recognize some of the people who did good work that day and who were courageous.
Okay.
We obviously didn't plan this ahead of time because we're winging it today. Do you have one off the top of your head you want to go with first, or you want me to go first?
There was the black officer.
Okay, look, man. If I tell you to go first, don't take my guy. All right.
Okay. I didn't know that you were going to him.
No. No, go for it.
Do you have his name?
Yeah, it's Eugene Goodman.
Eugene Goodman. Oh yeah, I should have remembered that.
I mean, it was very easy for me to remember because, you know.
Yeah.
Same name. Let me see if I can find the video, actually.
Incredible video.
I want to find a Twitter video. Oh, no, just this picture will do.
Were you able to determine if he had any firearms on him at the time? Because in the video that I saw, he's only waving basically a baton at them.
I think he did.
I think Capitol Police is armed. That's why I was surprised to see him only.
No, I think he did. I think he was he knew that he couldn't really use it. I mean, imagine using it and being a black man against this white insurrectionist mob.
Right, and
there was
one guy being aggressive toward him right in his face, but there were dozens and dozens and more behind them. So
yes,
right there.
So this picture right now that I'm hoping that you're seeing, you know, again, low budget production podcast, but
I see it.
Hopefully you all see that. So this is down the staircase to the right here is where all the mob guys are slowly getting up, right? And he's retreating. And so he is peeking into the hallway, and this hallway leads to the Senate. he's peeking in there
Crazy.
and seeing that there's nobody there to guard it. So what he does is there's this one guy following him, and he pushes him, you know, kind of antagonizing him. And then he walks the other way and lures the entire mob away from the Senate chamber.
Absolutely incredible.
This is just really heroic stuff.
And this is because he isn't certain if all of the senators are out of the room yet. This is how close it is.
And he understands that he is a black man, and that, you know, doing this to that first guy would be enough to get him to follow.
Yeah.
I mean,
wow.
It's just putting your life on the line, like, in the most brave way possible.
He's a hero.
He's a hero.
This is
so shout out to Eugene Goodman for sure.
Absolutely.
Who else you got?
I don't have anyone specific, but I do want to mention any of the, and I know you do have one of these people, but any of the photojournalists or camera people that were there from CNN, MSNBC, any of the networks that were there covering this, because I was watching live, and more than once I saw a camera person filming what was happening and seeing those people basically attacking them and destroying the cameras and doing who knows what to the people who are holding them. And I know that they have an unfriendly view of journalists and the press in general, you know, since Trump started calling them the enemy of the people. So any of the people who contributed to any journalistic work during this, because that's, to this point, all we have still. And it's very important work. You want to highlight one in particular, Eugene?
Yeah, I'm trying to find like anything. You know what?
Again, it's very difficult because there's no, there's no thread from the government about what happened here.
Right. They like, and also we don't do a really good job of covering these people who are doing like the work. Not we us personally, but just like in general.
The media, right? The media wouldn't focus on the cameraman who got beat up because he was holding a camera while filming these insurrections. The media doesn't talk about these people.
Yeah. So I'm doing a 2-in-1 here. One is that the guy's name from Jordan Chariton's organization, Status Quo, the photographer is John Farina. So John Farina was one of the photographers who was there inside the Capitol building. And he described what was happening with Ryan Grimm in this episode, Deconstructed, that you can see here. So this is my plug for Ryan Grimm, because we all love Ryan Grimm.
That's only Hope favorite Ryan Grimm.
Yeah, DC Bureau Chief. What a badass name. What a badass title.
Yeah.
So there's a 22-minute pod here. I think only half of it is John Farina describing what happened. But it's a good listen to just really get a good idea of just how scary it was to be in there. I mean, he was saying that I think you could barely see because they were using gas in there to try to disperse the mob, and the mob just got kind of angrier. And then on his way out, like, he was trying to push his way out. Everybody's trying to push in. He can't really see his way out. He's just really trying to feel his way out. And then just somehow he eventually gets out. And luckily there were people outside who were friendly enough to like give him water and things like that. But just, really, really brave work by the journalists who go and work there despite the mob clearly believing that the media is against them. And, Trump obviously has built that narrative up for 4+ years.
Yes. Excellent. Yeah, I really glad to highlight these kinds of things. Like you said, people do not focus on the people doing this kind of work often enough, and it's very important work.
Any more shout outs here? You want to do a smaller shout out for some of the people that are probably more well known?
I just want to, I would like to talk about that day of, that I was watching, like I said, all news networks for hours, and it bothered me for quite a while that as they were violently storming the building, every news outlet were still calling them protesters. And it was at some point later in the day when they realized that this was no protest, that this was something different and much more dangerous. They recognized it, and I know, for example, Chuck Todd actually said, "Hey, let's not call them protesters on air."
I mean, it's bad when Chuck Todd gets it right.
Chuck Todd gets it right, and again, I obviously he's the one who makes that call for MSNBC, NBC News. But it took some time for them to adjust, because they just seemed extremely reluctant to call them terrorists. They seemed reluctant to call them anything but just Trump supporters and protesters. And, my feeling was that they were legitimizing their show of force by calling them protesters, as though they had something legitimate to protest and that they were doing so peacefully when they were not.
Yeah.
But they did get it right, and the media has done a much better job of dealing with the narrative shifting by Republicans since that day. People calling for unity, and the people who led this insurrection now trying to turn the page on it and just pretend that nothing happened and that it wasn't very serious. I think the media is doing a better job now of saying what really happened and not allowing the narrative to change so easily. And I think the Democratic leadership has helped with that as well. So I'll just say those positives.
Yeah, small clap.
Yeah.
To the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Let's give a shout out to Ilhan Omar for drafting the articles of impeachment and for pushing that. Obviously, something like this, an event like this that is incited by the President of the United States who lost their election, obviously that is anti-democratic and should come with consequences. This is a crime under any other circumstance where democracy is actually working and there's law and order. And so it is important when people do things that are wrong for them to be held accountable. We haven't seen a lot of this for years and years and years. It seems like when it comes to the most powerful people, they seem to kind of just slip by and get away with very, very minimal consequences, if any consequence at all. And we can even go back to Democratic presidents, with Obama, and just not putting any of the people who destroyed the economy in jail.
Right. That was exactly what I was thinking too, the banking crisis, that none of the bankers ended up in prison over that.
Right. So, okay, if you cause a economic meltdown, but hey, I mean, like, if you're going to toy with democracy and possibly turn what was a democratic republic into a fascist state, I think we kind of have to draw the line there.
Yes.
And, Ilhan Omar, House Representative, from Minnesota? Oh, yes.
Minnesota.
Ooh, I'm wiping my brow right now. That was a close one. She is Muslim, obviously hated by the far right, probably by most of the regular right. It is brave of her to continue to put her neck out there and to do the right thing, to do what is called for in the situation. and to spearhead the drafting of articles of impeachment, and to really, in many ways, push leadership to do that. And, miraculously, Pelosi and Schumer are on the same page. And
this time,
right. But it's happening. It's obviously not going to happen fast enough. It's snail's pace. They could have reconvened on a weekend. They chose not to, and who knows when the vote will be, whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right. Yeah, I heard there was something about McCarthy had a say in whether or not they reconvened. They needed unanimous consent to do it earlier or something like that.
Yada, yada, yada. It's, there's going to be obviously a lot of politics involved. The Republican Party isn't really, is still going to cower behind this president for fear of losing, their base and losing power. But, Ilhan Omar doing the right thing. Anybody else?
No, I think I'm all out, Eugene.
All right, I got one more, not related to this past week, but I want to shout out to Kenny Clips.
Yay!
Ken Cliftenstein.
Another favorite of Only Hope.
That's right. He was working for The Nation and just got a new job, essentially doing the same job, but now for The Intercept. It sounds like the switch happened because he would have slightly more resources specific to his type of work. But yeah, he's an investigative reporter, and he gets a lot of scoops with, analyzing. God, I'm just reading from this now. I'm sorry, teachers, but
he specializes in FOIA as well, Freedom of Information Act requests.
Right.
He's very, very good and dogged journalist when it comes to getting information from people who are reluctant to give it using the law, which is wonderful.
So he's great. He's now teaming up with DC Bureau Chief Ryan Grimm at The Intercept. It's going to be great. And, I just want to congratulate him on his new job.
Yay. Congrats, Kenny Clips.
Also known for his amazingly just complete ownage on Twitter, for those who don't know. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm all potted out. I think therapy has been good.
This has been fun. I appreciate the time again, and for anyone who listens this far, we really do appreciate it. I mean, if anyone ever hears it, that would be amazing.
We appreciate you. And if you want to do some maybe visual work or video work, because obviously we're a low production podcast, just feel free to email us at onlyhopepod@gmail.com. With that, we will we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this next week goes, and hopefully the next time that we do a pod, we can do it a little bit sooner. I hope to do some more regular ones, but obviously our schedules, with holidays and just like work, it's always really busy. But I'd love to do some more pods, Thomas.
I would too. I have fun. I enjoy talking about the news and being positive with the news. It is a really wonderful form of therapy for me, more than you know.
Me too. All right, guys, so that's it. We will see you next time.